Hi, this is Ian Wright, and today I'm just going to talk about something that I've been thinking about recently, and it's entitled Negative Habitual Patterns and How to Shift Them. And it's something that obviously we all suffer from this complaint of slipping into negative habits. It's part of the human state of being, really. The first thing I want to say is, why do I do these podcasts and why am I kind of sharing these things? There's two reasons, really. The first is I spend a lot of my time working with clients, patients, and helping them in certain situations, be they physical, emotional, whatever. And when we're treating, it is beautiful for there to be silence and stillness, and we can allow the body to rebalance itself on a very deep level. And there isn't time to talk, give advice, etc., etc. So that's basically the first reason. The second reason is a little bit more selfish on some levels, is when I've been teaching a great deal of things from osteopathy, pediatrics, meditational stuff for almost 25 years now. And the best way to learn is to teach, is to show somebody else. And that's true with everything we do in life. If we can show someone else something, we're showing ourselves. So I'm teaching myself, really. So negative habits. I mean, that can be the obvious things, addictions, smoking, alcohol, food is one of the biggest negative addictions, eating too much or too little or both. Work, I mean, I suffer that. Working too hard, not allowing ourselves to stop working. I personally love what I do, so I do a lot of it, and I really enjoy it. But negative habits can be much more subtle things about not changing a specific relational pattern with a friend, loved one, co-worker, not addressing certain patterns of behavior within ourselves and our relationships, where we tend to get kind of stuck in a groove. It's like being in a groove, and once you're stuck in that groove, our brains think in a very similar way. We lock into that groove and we go, okay, this is my reaction to this situation. For example, if someone is prone to smoking, if I'm stressed, what do I crave? I crave a cigarette, or I crave a drink, or eating, or whatever it is, I need to do. But we get our brain patterns into a certain groove of behavior, and actually getting out of that groove is actually very difficult. And so proper real change is incredibly hard, because these patterns, these grooves are set when we're very young, and they develop through our lives, and they're reinforced with each time we produce this form of responsive behavior to a certain situation. So the groove gets deeper and deeper. So it takes a lot of things to actually really become aware of that and change it, which I'll go into. Just thinking about that, so I was thinking that there are different types of characters that we all embody, and actually normally we're a mixture of all of these. And I was trying to work out these different ones, and the first one I would call the butterfly, which is when we jump between different strategies. We're constantly, kind of like a butterfly does, flipping between different things, different flowers, and not really engaging with any of them. So that's the kind of, I would call, butterfly behavior, where we don't really make any change because we're flipping between ways of doing things. It's like you flip between different exercise routines and you never actually do any properly. You do a week or two of this, then you do, and that's very much, that kind of butterfly behavior is very much how modern life is created. Our attention, and again, a lot of things I talk about are about attention and how we become very aware and focus on attention. And our attention is light, and it flits between the TV, our phones, a conversation, the amount of stimulation and information that we receive is so much that our brains are become much more butterfly, because otherwise we're overwhelmed. If we pay attention or detail to one specific thing, it can be too much because there's all that other stuff out there that we can flip. So it makes us more butterfly. Now, I'll address that in a different podcast because it's a huge subject in itself. Another character type that I would say would be the dreamer, which is dreaming of, that way of being which you're perfectly fit and you eat perfectly and everything is ideal, and you can dream it all away, and you're careful with your money and you're this, that and the other, and you have dealt with all those elements in all the different relationships and everything is sweet, and it's like almost like living in this sense of dream future, and we all do this. We have all elements within that, and it's like not making something real, living in dream, and that's an important another one. The third, I would say, is the avoider, and we're all avoiders. We naturally avoid pain. We don't want to face certain truths often within ourselves and our lives and our relationships because it can be painful. Honesty can be painful. Okay, and then there's the other kind of couple of things, the no time situation. We never have enough time. There is no time to do all this kind of stuff, to bring consciousness to how we are and how we relate to the world. We just don't have time. We're overstimulated. The other one, which I think we all suffer from as well, is I've got too much on. I'm too stressed. I'm dealing with all this stress. I cannot possibly start to make a change because I'm just too stressed, and there's no way I want to address this because it's too much for me right now. So I'm sure there are other different kind of character or types, but I think all of us, everyone I've ever met, has a little bit of all of this in us, where we suffer from all those different elements that kind of pull us away from actually making true and real and lasting change in our lives. And real change, again, is incredibly slow, incredibly rare, and it's really hard to do. But the interesting thing about it is that if we don't make the changes that we should make, then the universe builds that, doesn't it? And actually we get into a situation where we have to. It's only when we're in dire situations where we are forced to change is when we change. And I would say that that's a little late. Why don't we try to become conscious of what we need to change first before we get into the dire situation with our health or our finances or our whatever it is, or our relationships or whatever. And so what that does, number one, is we have to become conscious of where we are. And that brings us straight to the first point, is we need honesty. So we're heading now into how do we change this? And number one, I would say, is honesty. Actually being really cold light of day honest with ourselves, not judgmental though. As soon as we judge ourselves, it's a classic addict's behavior, which we all have to some degree, is, doing something negative, eating the cake or whatever it is, spending that on that dress or whatever it is, and then feeling completely guilty, feeling stressed, shutting down, switching off, and then repeating the cycle, and it's completely normal, So actually, honesty has to take away the judge. The first thing we have to do with honesty is take away our judge and say, this is what I'm doing. Okay, like you're looking at somebody else. This is my patterns of behavior around work, food, whatever it is, money, relationships, all of the big players, let's say, and look at them clearly without judging. It will almost even write a list of things, and not to feel overwhelmed and not to become anxious about it, and actually be really quite kind and say, okay, this is what I'm doing. And it brings me on to the second thing, which I think is really important. We have to actually produce some self-acceptance, which means it's okay that this is how I'm behaving and this is how I have behaved, or this is what I've been doing with this situation, and go, I completely understand it, and it's fine, and I don't mind, and I will let myself off. So remove the judge, bring in some self-acceptance. And once you've done that, so we have honesty, we have no judge, and we bring in self-acceptance, then from that place, it kind of brings the situation into a state of neutral, where we're not emotional, we're not reacting. It quietens down. It comes to a point of neutral by which we can change. And without those steps, I think there is no chance that we can bring in change, because we're just working from guilt, blah, blah, blah. It's nonsense. It doesn't work, I don't think. From that point, we need to choose a new path. We have to become very conscious of where we are. So actually, it brings us almost into this neutral place of being neutral to ourselves, where we can become in that moment, because it's only when we're living fully in the moment we're in that we can actually consciously make a change. It's like you have to take the car out of gear when it's driving in the wrong direction, allow it to stop before you can change gears and change directions. Okay? So we become conscious, and as we make changes, if you're, say, for example, if you're going to change your eating habit, and eat healthy food 3 times a day, whatever, you have to become conscious, and you have to remain conscious, because as soon as we slip into unconsciousness, and when we become unconscious, it's normally when the triggers come in, which is stress, overwhelm, emotional issues that come up, anger, fear, whatever, all the big contenders that we all have in our lives, brings us to an unconsciousness about our habits. So we have to remain conscious, which means we have to be super kind. Okay, I'm feeling stressed. I'm going to slow down. I'm going to relax. I know that I feel like I need to go and buy something or go and do something, some form of behavior that will theoretically make me feel better, but I know I'll just feel guilty afterwards. So you bring yourself into awareness, you practice again the honesty, the self-acceptance, and you bring yourself into this neutral place to yourself. And then you bring in the motivation. Okay, I'm going to choose to do this a different way. And you can build it. The point is actually making real change has to be a moment by moment thing. You can't suddenly make a massive change and it's done. Very, very hard. You have to actually be conscious and aware, and you have to be motivated by that change. So you can have a big picture. My big picture is, whatever. I want to be really fit and healthy, or I want to avoid negative habits in this particular relationship. And you can see that as the big picture, but actually when it comes down to it, you have to, yes, you can keep an eye on the big picture, but you have to live very much consciously in the moment, I think, to make that change step by step, tiny, tiny steps. Because only through tiny, tiny steps, it's like climbing up a huge ladder, step by step. You'll actually get there, and it's the only way, but you have to remain conscious. And the first thing, again, I know I'm saying this a lot, it's to do with taking away your judge and being really kind and self-accepting. And from that point, it takes the edge out of it. And then you can bring in the honesty and the reality. And so we don't go towards butterfly or dreaming or avoiding those things that take us away from this actual real and proper change, and it's doable, but it's not easy. And I think that's really important to know, for us to all to know. We know that it isn't easy to make real change, but actually we just have to take a step in the right direction and remain conscious and self-accepting, and then that can begin. Okay, anyway, that was those are my thoughts. I think I'll try and use those. I wish you well.